There's some chance that above zero that AI will kill us all. I think it's low, but there's some chance.
All right, on that cheery note, Elon Musk, front and center again. He was at this big AI hearing on Capitol Hill, and it could lead, if you're not careful, to the destruction of mankind. For those who don't follow Elon Musk that closely, sometimes that might jar you. But my next gentleman, of course, followed him for the better part of 2 years, and I mean followed him all over the world to produce a remarkable book on the world's richest man. Walter Isaacson is his name. Elon Musk is the book. Walter, very good to see you.
Great to be with you, Neil. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. You know, Walter, I love reading your books, and I have read them. And I was telling you during the break that I probably sound like a groupie, so I apologize. But I get most of my books on this. I download them. And I only tell you that because I had no idea how many pages this was. And I take nothing against that because it moves fast. But there's a pattern to your work that you write epics. And there are a lot of pages. This one about, close to 680 pages. But you do something interesting. I think there are 95 some odd chapters in the book. And then I was looking at some of the others I love that you wrote on Steve Jobs. That one was 42 chapters, a little bit more than 420 pages. Albert Einstein, 33 chapters, about 469 pages. Leonardo da Vinci, 469 pages, better than 34 chapters. So there's a method. And I wonder why you do it like that.
Well, I hope you don't make it sound like too big of a tome, because I wanted to make it a narrative.
I'd save a lot of exercise just putting him on a device. But it is an interesting way. Your attention to detail is
well, I like
incredible.
to make it. Thank you. I like to make it a fast-telling story. I don't want to be one of those people who pontificates and tells you what you got to think. I'm saying, all right, I'm by this side. I'm going to tell you this story. And they're in bite-sized chunks. If you're really interested in Tesla, there he is doing things. If you're interested in his girlfriends and all the kids he's had, there's something on that. Then we move on to SpaceX. But he has so many things going on, including now, of course, AI, that I want this to be a fast-paced tale about a very complicated but unbelievably interesting guy.
He seems nutty. And I take nothing away from that. Some of our most incredible entrepreneurs and historic figures, they're not exactly emotional rock and Gibraltars, but he seems particularly strained.
He really has all these personalities, and at times he is totally crazy. And he'll admit it. He'll almost cackle about his craziness, and then he might go into a dark, brooding period. But you see that picture. He takes risks. Even at his birthday party, he gets a blindfolded knife thrower, and he's putting up balloons between his legs, or the sumo wrestler. But we used to be a nation of risk takers. We used to, no matter where you came from, whether it was on the Mayflower or you crossed the Rio Grande, people would take risks. And now we've become a nation filled with more referees than risk takers, more people telling you, no, you can't do it, it's not safe, or regulators, than people who are willing to innovate. And so I think that crazed risk-taking gene, page after page in my book, helps explain why he's getting rockets into orbit and us into the electric vehicle age.
No, I take nothing away from that. As you write yourself, as Shakespeare writes, the best are molded out of their faults. So he's got a lot of faults. To what extent did that mold him? But those faults, or whatever you want to say, seem to go back to a rocky relationship with his dad. And his father was, seems like a real SOB, but I'm just wondering, why does he react the way he does?
He would turn dark whenever we talked about it, sort of a sad look coming over his face. And he was beaten up as a scrawny kid, Elon was. Not very many social graces then or now. And the scars, though, were worse that came from his father. He had to stand in front of his father once after a really bad being beaten up on the playground. His father berated him for an hour and a half and said, "You're stupid, you're at fault," took the side of the people who beat him up. And so that produced a lot of demons in his head. And all successful people, I think, have some demons. The question is, which demons do you channel into drives?
So his father, Elon Musk, he seems like one of the original conspiracy theorists. I could go on about he talked about COVID being a lie, that Trump was duly elected. I'm not trying to get into politics here, but the Sun seemed to take on a lot of the mercurial qualities, or am I missing something?
Absolutely right, Neil. And his mother said to me at the very beginning, Mae Musk, when I was starting the reporting, said the danger for Elon is that he becomes his father. And this is a theme we've seen, Luke Skywalker, epic hero fighting the dark side of the Force, and Darth Vader. And Musk has been able to fend that off. But there is that sort of dark mode that sometimes late at night, Musk will be there. He'll put out tweets. He will say things that have that sort of fringe quality. But then at other times, like yesterday, he's meeting with Chuck Schumer, meeting with senators. So he's got different personalities, which is why it's a rollicking roller coaster of a read.
There's no doubt he's a genius. As you even said, say what you will of him, and did he pay too much for Twitter? The fact of the matter is, whether you're woke or not, more voices are being heard on Twitter. You could make that argument. But it's how he gets there personally, and the way he treats workers, staff members, family members. He can be pretty abusive. You had written that he lacks the empathy gene, and others have said of that. I'm just wondering, in the 2 years, I believe it was that long, that you were tracing him and following him and seeing this play out, whether you saw it enough for yourself. You said, this is not a nice guy.
Definitely. And there are a lot of times that's an understatement to say he's not nice to the people around him at times, especially when he's mission-driven. And in the book, you'll see dozens of anecdotes, dozens of tales where he'll be walking at say, the base in South Texas where they're launching Starship, and suddenly he'll get angry and order up a surge and really ream people out. But there are times he's inspiring. There's times when he's funny, times when he's really caring. And he would say, and does say in the book, that yes, he sometimes lacks what we would call empathy, but it's partly because if you care too much about pleasing everybody around you, you're never going to fulfill your mission. Now, that's not me. I don't think that's a great way to be. I think you should always try to be nice. But I'm writing a story about a person who's got light strands and dark strands in them, and I'm letting the reader figure out, okay, what causes this to work and not work.
All right. Now, Steve Jobs was known as an SOB, and he was very careful in finally agreeing and to talk to you and to sort of weed out what he wanted to get out. So a very different personality here. Also, sometimes not a very nice guy. Not that any of this, I think, in the scheme of things, to your point, should matter, but how do you distinguish the two?
Well, I do think it should matter, but you do see a lot of people, from Jeff Bezos to Bill Gates to Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, who sometimes can be really rough on the people around him. I've written about other people like Jennifer Doudna, who brought us the tools for gene editing, and she's a very nurturing person in her lab. So you don't have to be this way. As for Steve Jobs, he had a very spiritual side. He connected very much emotionally. He understood human emotions, which is why, frankly, the iPhone is so beautiful. It sings to us. And I think that Musk has a lot of strengths, including understanding manufacturing and physics and engineering, but he doesn't have a feel for human emotions. And that's why buying Twitter, I think, hasn't been exactly a pretty sight at all times.
But again, I don't know, even in the case of Twitter, I think he would be the first to acknowledge he paid too much, but it might all work out. It's his views back and forth, what he was going to do with Twitter, that show how he can flip almost on a dime. He was, it seemed briefly, a big fan of Donald Trump. He has since said of him, he's a con man, he's kind of nuts. Joe Biden, I think his only meetings with him were when he was vice president, to your point, but that he found him dull, boring, not exactly exciting. Did he ever reveal to you someone he really liked for president? There was a time when it was, DeSantis, but I'm not sure whether that flips too. I
don't think he's settled on a candidate. He spends a lot of time making political pronouncements.
Right.
But in politics and everything else, he's rather mercurial. There'll be times in the middle of the day he's in a good mood. He tells me that we need to have a center in this nation. We need to help support moderates, that people in Republican and Democratic side that can come together. You're showing him with Obama there. You know, he was a big fundraiser for Obama.
That's right.
So he will talk about the need for bringing center together. Then there'll be times late at night when he's particularly angry at somebody for dissing him, and it may be a Democratic politician, it may be, you know, whatever, and he gets dark. So I don't think his politics are easy to pigeonhole. Especially when it came to Twitter, when he wanted to open up the field to more speech. But in some ways, he's got to make sure it's not so toxic that advertisers flee.
Yeah, I mean, some of these tweets are infamous here before it became X, where he wasn't a fan of Joe Biden. But one of the things I wanted to explore with you is what sets him off. If a politician challenges him, he was a rock star to a lot of the people on the left. You know, with his very energy efficient, you know, environmentally safe and beautiful cars. And then he started espousing some of these political views, and the same people who said great things about him turned on him. How did he feel about that?
Well, he got very, you know, once when he was at a wilderness camp as a little kid, he used to get beaten up. They took all his food. Next time he went, he was a little bit bigger. And he said, I just learned to punch people in the nose as hard as I can. And even though they'd beat me up, they'd remember that I'd punched them in the nose. So he's pugnacious so much so that you can be a bit shocking. So he has done that, especially when Elizabeth Warren says you're dodging taxes. He ends up not only punching back, but he ends up exercising options and paying, I think, more tax than any human has ever paid to any person, any government in history.
Yeah.
But that gets him all set up and riled up. So he will get pugnacious politically, but I'm sure he'll do it to people on the right as well as the left.
But he seems to embrace doing that kind of stuff to get in the public's face. Whereas when you've written about Steve Jobs in the past and even Albert Einstein, they would have their run-ins and mercurial kind of behaviors within a small group. But it's worldwide. You know, there's the Rockefeller motif, I guess. You know, but he's very different than that. Is that just who he is?
Right.
How would you define it?
You know, as a young kid, very lonely, he used to sit in the corner of the bookstore and read the comics, the superhero comics. And he said they were trying to save the world, but they were wearing their underpants on the outside, so they looked ridiculous. And then he paused, he said, but at least they were trying to save the world. He's got an epic sense of mission. And, I mean, just this week, Ukraine, Taiwan, China, artificial intelligence, going to meet with Chuck Schumer and Chris Coons and others who he really respected and said nice things about. He can be all over the map, and I don't think he minds playing epic on the world stage.
You know, I'd be very curious. I mean, you mentioned how he doesn't forget some slides, obviously the battle back and forth with Bill Gates that I guess dates back to the time the former Microsoft founder was shorting the stock in Tesla, and he was just apoplectic about it. I don't know whether they buried the hatchet there. But what has the reaction been to the revelations in your book from him? I know he wanted to write and clarify what you had written and said about Starlink and the working with Ukraine. I don't want to get in the weeds here. That bothered him. He wanted to clarify that. You clarified that. But anything else in the book that he just said, Walter, come on, you're killing me here?
No, he was very good. He said, I'm going to be totally transparent. I'm going to be more transparent than anybody's ever been with any writer or biographer. You can be by my side at all times. And I said, fine, but no control over the book. I'm not even going to send it to you to read it first. So I'm not absolutely sure
You never
he's read
sent
the
him
book.
a galley or anything. You just, boom.
I thought it was important, and he thought it was important, that this be as open as possible, but also an independent book, where he's a tough character. If he tried to control the book, it would not be great for either the book, for me, for him.
You wouldn't allow it. But the other stuff that's come out, and all this personal stuff, and the demon mode, and all of this, and how he lacks the empathy gene, and his rocky relationship with his father, and the fights back and forth, and all this baggage, he didn't get back to you on this and say, this isn't at all what I thought?
Oh, no. He knew what I was going to write. I mean, we talked about all of these things. He's not very happy talking about his childhood. It makes him choke up.
Yeah.
But there's, we talked about all these things in the book, and I think he wanted something that was almost brutally honest, and he's not objective. I've seen the things he's posted in the past week, and he'll comment on things, but he is not, knock on wood, decided that to go ballistic on anything.
So he's okay with you revealing that the world's richest man cuts his own hair?
You should look at his hair. Sometimes it looks like it's cut by a Korean barber who's about to be executed. And he was open up, like he's had another child by Claire Boucher, the artist known as Grimes. And I was with him, took pictures, and I said, I'm going to put this in the book. He said, fine. I'd like it all to be in context, exposed this way.
Yeah. About Mark Zuckerberg and that relationship and whether they were going to have a physical throwdown. For the best I could tell, when they were on Capitol Hill yesterday, they didn't. But was that all just drama?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I kept telling people, wait a minute, this is a drama. This is a drama magnet. He loves stuff like that. He's not going to rent the Colosseum in Rome, put a cage in it, and go in with Mark Zuckerberg. It's just part of, his sense of humor may be different from yours or mine, but it has that sort of Monty Python mixed with a sophomore in college dorm room. And that was sort of a role-playing sense of humor. And I kept telling people, don't buy your tickets to that cage match yet.
Walter, I think what you hit on, in all seriousness, too, he is concerned about the human species. And a lot of people have not heard him enough on this. And you pointed out far more eloquently than I am right now that we're doomed as a species. I think that's why he wants to get us into space and Mars and all that stuff. Is he really concerned that humankind has a shelf life on it?
Yes, and when you ask about, is he empathetic? Does he care about, is he nice to the people around him? He's more empathetic to humanity, if you know what I mean, than maybe the 5 or 6 people who might be in front of him on a factory floor. And he has 3 great missions that he's had since he was in college. One is to get us into an era of sustainable energy, including electric vehicles. The other is something could happen to this planet, to our civilization. We're the only consciousness we know of in the universe. We got to become a spacefaring civilization. That's the adventuresome part of us. And thirdly, he read Isaac Asimov as a kid. He worries about artificial intelligence and robots being dangerous. I used to think that some of these are my missions, were kind of the pep talks you give your team or the pontificating you do on podcasts. But over and over, I heard him talk about it and relay things back there. I really think that this is part of this deep motivation of a man-child who thinks of himself on the stage.
It's an excellent book and a very intriguing figure.
Thank you.
Very good seeing you, Walter Isaacson.